Hello, Anne, and welcome. It's my pleasure to have you here with me. Thank you for joining us. I really look forward to making music with you. So, coming up, we have Dvorak's cello concerto. So, tell me, maybe just to get your feet wet here, to get the interview started, in one sentence, what do you love about playing the cello?
Oh, the cello. Well, I think many people, you'll hear this from many people, they say it encompasses the human voice range, and I totally agree. But it can emulate so many different sounds. And the Dvorak, well, this is more than one sentence now, but the Dvorak is just such a great example of the cello sort of in a dialogue with the orchestra and emulating all the different sounds that come from all over the orchestra. So that's my favorite thing about the cello, and maybe about the Dvorak too.
Excellent. So let's say, what was the initial hook moment? When did the cello choose you? How did this happen?
It's my journey into music actually started because I grew up doing ballet. My mom was a ballet dancer, and I grew up watching lots of ballets and watching old videos and doing it as soon as I could walk, pretty much. And I really enjoyed it, but then I was trying to figure out, what do I really love about this so much? And I realized I just like the music that's happening underneath all the dancing, and I was actually much more drawn to that. So I became really interested in wanting to start an instrument, and I really wanted to start violin, but I have an older sister, and she was playing violin, and she said, cannot play the same instrument as me. So went to the next, and of course bigger is better, so went to cello because it's bigger than the violin. But yeah, that's sort of how I got into playing the cello specifically.
That's a cool story of how it started. Now let's talk about your early teachers who shaped you initially. What did they insist on?
I was really lucky with my musical upbringing. I started in Suzuki, but the teacher I worked with, his name was Wayne Krieger, at the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky. He also was really into this thing called creative movement, where he would play and he would encourage you. I was super little. I was maybe 5 or 6, and
Wow.
he would give you time to just listen to him play and move. So it tied into this whole dance upbringing that I had, and he would have us try to improvise with him in lessons. He put a lot of he added improvisatory and sort of jazz elements into his teaching, which was, looking back, incredibly creative, and I was super lucky. And then also the benefits of growing up in a smaller city was that I had a lot of support immediately when I was starting, just because I had kind of so much passion and drive immediately when I started the cello, that a lot of people kind of stepped forward and recognized that. My parents weren't musicians, so a lot of people in the music community in Louisville really guided my parents and where to take me for lessons. And we started traveling almost immediately for cello lessons. I went up to Indiana University a lot, studied with Helga Winnel, who was an assistant to Janos Starker. So I started traveling immediately for lessons and expanding my horizons in multiple ways, literally also, which is how much we were driving to get for these studies. And it was all very formative and really, I think, shaped the direction I went very clearly.
Very cool. Now, in specifically in technical points, was there at any moment a breakthrough you remember? Anything to do with sound, the bow, vibrato, rhythm, anything that clicked in you and you were like, wow, this is a before and after kind of moment?
Well, I remember when I was studying with Mr. Krieger, with Wayne Krieger, and we were following, a very clear curriculum, and I was listening to lots of recordings, and I was so in love with the cello, and I was still very young, like 6, maybe, And I asked him, how do you make that sound where it wiggles? I didn't know the word was vibrato, and I asked him, and I don't think he expected to get that sort of question, just because it was not necessarily linear in our progression. It was sort of out of what I was ready for. But he told me, but he gave me a very wonderful answer. It was just like, well, just try to hear it and imagine what it would feel like and just try it out. And I remember that because I still think about that sometimes when, you study for years and years and you get this entire technical arsenal of things to work on. And it's always sometimes nice to remember like the total basics of what do you hear and what do you imagine it would feel like, and just test it out. It's so simple. And sometimes we get lost in all of the correct ways to learn things and do stuff. And I always try to occasionally go back and remember just that simplistic curiosity that can be so refreshing when you're practicing so many hours a day and learning stuff.
Right. Now, I'm talking about which, this is more than anything else thinking, sometimes musicians struggle or have a period in which there is an injury or a frustration or something. So what would you say, the hardest phase in terms of motivation or injury or self-doubt, anything, and what got you through it?
Well, I certainly had a lot of self-doubt. I still have self-doubt. I no longer apologize for my self-doubt, because I feel like it's kind of an important part of being an artist and a musician, is to have that questioning. I don't think it necessarily means weakness. I think it just means sensitivity, which we want in music. But I certainly went through a long phase of trying to figure out how to not be overwhelmed by nervousness or self-doubt. And I went through a lot of different, I tried out so much stuff. I did like hypnotherapy. Wow. I did hypnosis and all these things of trying to figure out. This was when I was in high school and beginnings of college.
Alexander technique ever at all?
I never did that actually, but I ended up really finding a lot of help in yoga. I got really into Ashtanga yoga, which is a very specific type of yoga and asana, and but the point being that your breath, gets you through every movement. And sometimes when I first started it was a huge realization of, well, playing the cello it should kind of be the same thing. Like our breath should be connected to our movement. And I started practicing very specifically, like using my exhale to try to relax on specific things. Like in certain places of the bow where I would find I would be getting tense, I would just try to exhale in that moment. And it's just, I still use that to this day of practicing inhaling and exhaling as I go through a piece. Not to necessarily plan it out where you're going to breathe, but just to feel like it is all connected. And you have more control over your breath than you do. Sometimes it feels like you have less control over your body and your muscles. But if you just connect everything to your breath, then it's much easier to stay grounded and to find something to hold on to in performance.
Wow, and this probably definitely relates to your ballerina background, and
definitely.
That's phenomenal how it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe a few questions regarding your professional path and gigs and summers and stacking experiences, and I don't know, what was your first job or first gig or a sub week, or how did that start and what surprised you?
Well, my orchestral career and education was very pandemic driven. At the time that the pandemic hit, I was doing my doctorate, Doctor of Musical Arts at the University of Michigan, and everything was shut down. And I think I maybe would have made different choices if it hadn't been so isolated, but I was really lucky I could live back with my parents during this time, but I was very isolated from any live music making experience. I was basically just studying and online teaching, and I missed performing so much, and I didn't expect to. I had planned to go into a DMA, which really focuses on teaching and research, and then with the fact that there were no opportunities to perform, it made me miss it even more and realize how much I really did not want to give that up. So I started taking a lot of auditions, and I took an audition for an orchestra academy in Germany, in Munich, for the Bavarian Radio Symphony Orchestra, their academy. And sort of on a whim, I went over and took the audition and got the position in the academy. And so I moved there and I lived there for about 2 years and got a lot of experience, got to live in Germany and kind of experience a whole different culture, which I loved, and took many auditions, traveled, took lots of lessons, and then ended up, 2 years later, winning the job in San Francisco. So this orchestra job is my first real job.
That is incredible.
Yeah, it was a spontaneous but also arduous path.
Yeah.
Both are true.
So I was going to ask you if there was ever a moment where you felt, okay, I can do this as a career, but it seems like it very rapidly happened for you, right?
Well, my audition process was not maybe as easy as for some, or not easy, but it wasn't as spontaneous. My decisions were spontaneous, but I took many auditions before I won the one. I was getting really, really close a lot of times, and which was exciting, but then it was also incredibly disappointing and energy draining. And I think my audition for San Francisco was the 10th audition I took in that year.
Wow.
And it was kind of in my mindset, like, so after this one, I'll take a break. I just needed a bit of a break from the audition process. I had a temporary contract lined up in Leipzig at the Gewandhaus Orchestra. So I had a place I could go, but I was kind of just exhausted.
Of course.
So when people ask me audition advice now, someone who's maybe in a similar position of, I keep auditioning and I can't, my feedback is usually just like, take auditions until you think you can't take any more, and then take one more and you'll win one.
Yeah, and it's wonderful you went straight into auditions, because that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about next. And a lot of people will want to know and will need some guidance. So I don't know if you would care to share about your audition prep timeline, weeks, days, or what you practice first each day, excerpts, concertos, fundamentals, how do you deal with nerves, anything you want to share?
Or I felt very stuck with orchestral excerpts for a really long time. I think there's such a template that we're taught, which is good. It's good to have all the things to think about in each excerpt, but it's very, very technical. And when you work on it for so many months or years, it kind of can just become devoid of context. Each excerpt just kind of becomes an etude and devoid of the meaning and the orchestral meaning and the musical meaning. And I certainly started to feel very burned out with them. And I think I didn't do as well in auditions with this feeling. And I decided to sort of, change my thinking at a certain point and try to feel like, well, if this was a normal job interview, you'd want to be showing that not only are you qualified, but you will be a great colleague and you appreciate the work that you would be doing. And so I started to think, like, how can I apply that to what we're doing? And so maybe each excerpt is a way for me to show my appreciation of this element of orchestral repertoire versus this excerpt is how I show I play rhythmically perfect in tune and all these things. Instead, just make it something much more generous and just a nicer thing to think about. So
not getting trapped into trying to win the job, but actually trying to make music no matter what.
Yeah, because also you could play you can never guess what a committee is wanting to hear, and you shouldn't have to, because there is also an element of chemistry at the end of the day. You play a certain way, and you want an orchestra that will want you for how you play. And that also was a mind shift that was important to me, of instead of going into audition thinking, I want to do okay, I want them to think I play okay.
Right.
Instead, go into the audition thinking, I want to play in a way that I think is okay, that I think is good.
Right.
So
very,
it's much
very
more.
important.
Yeah, you can't, especially behind a screen. You can try to read a room behind a screen. It's impossible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Better to just
I mean, and since you mentioned screens, I mean, I suppose depending on which orchestra, some of the finals will not be behind a screen, some of the different rounds maybe. So what changes musically for you in terms of playing behind the screen or actually being able to see people?
Not much, really. I don't know if I've ever... There is a visual aspect without a screen, which is sort of... and a personal aspect, which is nice, where you feel like you can see who you're playing for. And, that can be a good or bad thing depending on how you feel in the moment. But I think it's still a performance behind a screen too. You're still trying to show the exact same things, and moving or not moving, physical things. I think the movement should just help you play better. Or if you don't move, whatever it is, it should be for the purpose of your musical endeavors rather than a performance, visual draw or anything like that.
Right. Cool. So going back to the beginning, and your official title is Associate Principal Cello of the San Francisco Symphony, right?
Yeah.
So this is an extremely coveted position in a top symphony orchestra in the world. So you were at the time living in Germany, I suppose, since what you just told us. How did it feel to get that phone call saying you won this job?
It was amazing. It was really amazing. I was exhausted. I came over for the audition from Germany, and I didn't even really read the fine print too carefully. So I booked my flight, and the preliminary round and semifinals, finals, it was all within like 10 days. So I booked my flight and came over for that time period. And I kept thinking, oh my God, like if I don't pass the prelims, it's not the end of the world, but it'll suck to be, it won't be great. It won't feel good to, have come over and then just be sitting in a hotel room for 10 days.
Right.
And so once I advanced past the prelims, I felt like, okay, at least I'm not wasting my time here. I'm doing something important. I'm busy the whole time. Little did I know, if I had passed the prelims, they would have flown me back. So I didn't actually have to spend 10 days here. It was all very, as I said, I can make decisions sometimes spontaneously. So that was maybe another example of that. But yeah, it was amazing to get that call. And I had a trial week with Massapequa conducting, and everything just sort of, it just fit. We were talking about chemistry and how you have to trust that you'll have that in the audition process. And this was an example where everything just seemed to sort of fall into place perfectly. And it was easy to play with the section here and to get along with everyone. It felt effortless in the moment.
Wonderful. And I was going to ask you something related to what you just said about your first rehearsal with the orchestra, and was there anything in particular you noticed about the sound culture or anything, in comparison to the German orchestra you were working with, about sound delay between the beat or anything that immediately you found striking different?
Well, I think I was a bit I was looking out for those elements when I started, or when I had my trial week here. There are certainly a lot of stereotypes for American orchestras versus European orchestras. In reality, I didn't feel like it affected much, except for maybe I had to play a little bit flatter than I was used to.
Right.
But even then, it was your ear adjusts very quickly, and I grew up kind of thinking these stereotypes of, well, American orchestras don't move very much, and they're more technical, and I don't really even know where those stereotypes come from. I don't know if they're really based in anything, but I had this perception, and then I was really sort of just relieved and super happy when I came for my trial week, because I found that it was extremely comparable to what I was used to in Germany. Everyone, I mean, in San Francisco, there's so many passionate players. Everyone, really. It's an incredibly dynamic orchestra, and a lot of integrity coming from individuals, which really leads to a unique type of group sound, which I really appreciate.
How would you say, how would you describe the associate principal role? How is it different from section playing? What is the real job, so to speak, beyond playing? Leadership, communication, listening, anything you care to share?
I think it's a unique role where you have to be able to switch back and forth between two distinct roles quite often. When I'm sitting second chair, which is my associate chair, my job is to help lead, but also very much confirm what our principal is doing, and to be just there to support, not there to support in sound, in musicality, just really confirming so that the entire section feels like they know what to do, because two people, their principal is doing something and the person next to them is confirming that is what to do. To make it extremely simple. So that's a position that requires, I think, a lot of malleability and flexibility, and sort of the ability to mirror very fast. It helps, certainly. And when our principal is not there, I am sitting principal, so then I am in a different position where I am the one, making decisions, making leading choices, and the person next to me is then the one who is confirming, hopefully, and helping me pass these ideas back.
Very cool. Very cool. Now I wanted to ask you about your work. You as a musician in these top orchestras, you've worked with many conductors. So how would you say, what do great conductors do that instantly elevate the orchestra and also the cello section?
Well, I think the number one thing is showing rather than telling. A great conductor will show an idea before they will ever, and they may not ever tell you what the idea is. You don't need to know. You don't need to hear it in words. That's the great thing about what we do. There's so much information that can be shared without any talking.
Right.
And that's the first thing, I think. Also, a great conductor, when they do stop and talk, it's, the flip side, to say something that they couldn't possibly share with their hands, whether it's a specific place to play on the bow or type of vibrato to have, or those kind of technical clarifications. And also, I think, just a presence that you're drawn to, that you want to watch, and you want to make their vision happen, because they have a charisma and they have just a love for what they're doing, for lack of a better word. It's something that we all it's the one thing we all share in common on stage is, we love what we're doing. We love the music. And when a conductor really can emulate that, I think everybody, locks in and really tries to make that happen for all of us.
That's wonderful. Now, would you recall a a rehearsal moment you'll never forget? Anything that, changed the room completely?
Mm. Trying to think.
Or anything humorous, anything that...
Well, I will actually, one of the first things, very formative experience for me playing in Germany, we were playing a concert actually, and Michael Tilson Thomas was conducting Copland Third Symphony with Bavarian Radio, and it was the first time that orchestra had played it, which in itself was sort of funny to me because it's very commonly played here. It's just, I think it was even a Munich premiere.
Wow.
So we were doing it in the concert, and I was still new. It was maybe my second concert, and I was very nervous. And I think a lot of times we're taught to be like, when in doubt, don't play, this kind of attitude in orchestra. And so I was very aware of that, and I wouldn't come in unless I was sure. And then in the concert, I came in wrong, and I thought, oh my God. It wasn't like super noticeable or anything, but I was just a wreck. I was like, they're going to send me home. And I was clearly upset with myself when the applause started. And my stand partner, he leaned over and he said, next time when you come in wrong, play much louder. And and I laughed, but then he was like, no, really, if you're gonna come in wrong, it's because you really think it's right. You should play like you really believe it's
Make
right.
it convincing.
Yeah, so it kind of like, made me question that whole best option is to be careful attitude that we have in orchestra.
Funny. That is so funny.
Yeah. And now I come in wrong all the time. I'm just kidding.
Let's say, switching, the mindset as a soloist, when you're playing a concerto, what do you want most from the conductor in rehearsals or the performance? What makes you feel the most comfortable, safest, that you can really express yourself?
Well, I think it's usually extremely natural, because you just want to know someone is there supporting and listening to you and enjoying the piece the way you do. And it's certainly the case, this week. And I haven't had an experience with a bad conductor as a soloist, but maybe it's also because I'm extremely focused on trying to get my own vision and, musical ideas across. So it's always, it's just always so nice to have someone who is just listening to you the way you are.
Very cool. And I see that you've had extremely varied and wonderful experiences. I read when you're still very, very young, but when you were even younger, you played the Dutilleux with Alan Gilbert.
Yes.
That's an amazing piece. I had the pleasure of conducting that piece like 10 years ago.
It's amazing.
What a great composer. My God, that piece is beautiful.
It was amazing. And I ended up, because I had learned that piece so well. I knew the score so well for the concert, but I was 19, and
amazing.
I didn't know anything about music theory, really. I knew basics, but I didn't know anything about like that kind of 12-tone, the way Dutilleux writes. It's his own language, and I didn't do any sort of an analysis. I just knew the score, and I knew the colors. I knew what I heard and what I wanted to hear, but I didn't know why I wanted to hear certain things. So then when I was doing my doctorate, it was actually kind of cool. I could go back, and I wrote, one of my papers was about that concerto in a really analytical way, which was more meaningful because I had known it on the side of a performer, and then to go back and look at it and delve into all these things, it's just like, oh, that's why I wanted to do this a certain way. It makes total sense. It was an interesting kind of full circle moment.
Which definitely makes you a much more complete artist with different understandings. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so let's maybe focus for a little bit on the Dvorak cello concerto, and anything you want to share. Where does this concerto sit in the repertoire? Why is it such an important one within the cello repertoire?
Well, it's massive. I don't know if a concerto was as greatly orchestrated and just the sheer size of it. I don't know if there was anything quite comparable before. I know that Dvorak had used kind of Victor Herbert as a cellist and his concerto as a muse for his own concerto. But I think it's, I was reading that Dvorak was in America when he wrote it, and it was a very limited group of pieces that he wrote when he was there. And there's something so nostalgic about the piece that, of course, there was tragedy in his life at the time, his sister-in-law and passing away, and you can almost hear a sense of homesickness too. But there's something that is, very kind of melancholy about the whole thing, even when has all this bravura and all these charismatic elements. You still sort of hear this undertone of melancholia, and a lot of that, I think, is defining for the cello. Like, it defines the cello as sort of this mellow instrument that, I don't know, it kind of gave the cello an iconic sound in that sense of being able to express something in the soul like that, of missing something.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that's what's so striking about it.
Do you have a favorite goosebump kind of moment in the piece? And I don't know if you have any kind of emotional story within the three movements, anything that you think about, or that it takes you somewhere.
Yeah, I think the slow theme from the exposition is, of course, it's just gorgeous. And then what I love about that theme is that the horn introduces it first, and it is so majestic and pure, and I always try to just emulate the horn whenever I then play the piece, when I play that theme, which kind of means sacrificing some of these super expressive things that cellists want to do, which is, take a lot of time and slide and use, rich vibrato. And there's so many opportunities to do that in the Dvorak. And this particular theme, though, is one where if you actually kind of resist those elements, you're left with something that is even more beautiful. Something that's just very simple but deep in a really interesting way.
Cool. And for somebody who is hearing it live for the first time, what would you suggest? What should they listen for?
Well, you should listen for the triangle in the third movement. That's one of my favorite things. I think it's the first time a triangle was used in a cello concerto. But yes, definitely listen for that. Listen for the horns. I mean, they make the sound, and they sort of create this carpet for the cello to sing on top of. So that's definitely for that. Also, I think Dvorak quoted one of his songs in the second movement and the last movement, and you can, even if you don't know what the song is, you can probably figure out, what sounds the most like you could sing it. And there are many elements like that, but I think those are the things that I find fun to listen for in the piece.
And it's wonderful how you mentioned so many things about the orchestration and all these details and color, and how the soloist and the orchestra really intertwine in such a seamless way that is masterful.
Definitely, yeah.
Now, if you had to mention other concertos you adore playing, or dream of playing, which would those be, or why?
Well, we spoke about Victor Herbert because he was a muse for Dvorak, and I played his second cello concerto, but it's a dream of mine one day to play the first cello concerto, which is hardly ever played because, well, it's hardly ever learned because there's no piano reduction. So it's pretty much impossible to learn it without, having the assistance of a pianist to accompany you.
Right.
And it's really not played very often, but it was one of the first pieces I heard when I was learning the cello. I heard a recording of Lynn Harrell playing that second movement. And it's just so delightfully romantic, and it's hard to even think about the fact that all these great masterworks were also being written in the time where, like, standard songs and classic American, vaudeville era, this kind of easy listening jazz, beginnings of jazz, that was all also happening. And so this one Victor Herbert concerto, it reminds me, it has elements of that. And Victor Herbert actually wrote popular songs too in his time. So it's a piece that I would be interested to learn one day, but we'll see.
You surprised me.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to go for the Schumann or
yeah.
or one of the other typical chansons.
All great too. I mean, you can't go wrong with any cello concertos, in my opinion.
It is absolutely true, and clearly you've shown in your breadth of repertoire and playing, all the way to Dieu and back to Dvorak. You're an omnivore for sure.
Yeah.
All right, I think it's almost time to close here, but I wanted to ask you a couple of final questions. If you have any practice hacks, or if you have any pre-concert rituals or post-concert rituals, anything like that you care to share?
Sure. My practice hacks all stem from, I was just telling someone about this yesterday. It all stems from my favorite book about learning. It's called Make It Stick. And it's a book about just how we learn. And so I got all of my practice hacks from that, which was, the best way to learn something is to learn it and then forget it and learn it again and forget it and learn it again. That's how things become permanent in your brain. So I always try to do that by really thinking about trying to divide my practice so I have multiple attempts to learn and forget something throughout the practice session. So I really, I practice something and then I switch very quickly to something else. And then I will go back to that thing and then switch. It's just constantly like leaving and revisiting something in a way where it's almost jarring for your brain. But it really cements your ideas, and it cements like the idea of the first time you play something is the most important. It's like if you play something one time and it's terrible, and then you go back and you do it a second time and it's great, it doesn't really mean much. The first time is the most indicative of what you're going to play like in a performance. So if you can rig your practice so you have as many chances to do that first time as possible, and they'll get better each time, you're sort of, not bypassing, but you're really kind of tricking your brain into doing well on the first time. That's my general practice hack. And performance,
pretty great.
It is. It's really fun to think about these. I find it fascinating to think about organizing your practice in a way where using all these techniques that like pilots and surgeons. This book is based on all of that, all this research and stories from these people who are in like life and death kind of professions. And we get the same sort of nerves, when we're playing, but nothing's going to happen if we play badly. No one's going to die.
Right.
But it's not fun, but it is interesting to kind of apply those techniques that people in those professions use. And then for performance, I usually will have a recording just on all day of not necessarily the piece I'm playing, but just of a cellist who I'm just really into at the moment. And I'll just have that on all day and kind of just find comfort in their sound and just remind myself, well, I want to be able to play in a way that makes me feel like I feel when I'm listening to this cellist. And it's not really groundbreaking, but that's kind of my routine for a performance day.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. Again, I can't wait to welcome you in Sacramento, to have you as a soloist very, very soon.
I'm so excited.
In closing, if there's anything else you want to share, to say to the audience.
No, thank you so much for this, and I hope to see so many of you there. I can't wait to perform, and it's been wonderful so far, and can't wait for more rehearsals next week.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you very soon.
Okay, sounds good.